The girl couldn't have been more than 8. She stood in the doorway of the ranch house like something carved from wind and dust, her dress torn at the hem, her bare feet caked in red clay. Her hair hung in dark tangles across her face, and her eyes, those eyes were older than they should have been. John Calloway had been pouring coffee when he heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, deliberate, like someone who knew knocking mattered. He set the pot down slowly, wiped his hands on his shirt, and crossed the room. When he opened the door, he didn't speak right away, just looked at her. She didn't flinch. "You Calloway?" she asked. Her voice was small but steady, like a candle that refused to go out in the wind. "I am. My papa said to find you if something happened." John's jaw tightened. He glanced past her, scanning the empty stretch of land that rolled toward the horizon. No horse, no wagon, no sign of anyone else. "Where's your papa now?" The girl's lips pressed together. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She held it out to him with both hands, like an offering. John took it carefully. The cloth was stained, dark in places. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a single boot, a man's boot, worn leather, the sole split clean through. And tucked inside, folded tight, was a letter. The girl's voice cracked. "This letter was in Papa's boot," she sobbed. He told me to bring it to you if he didn't come back." John's throat went dry. He stared at the boot, then at the letter. His hands didn't move. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Eliza." "Eliza what?" She hesitated. "Eliza Brennan." The name hit him like a fist to the chest. Brennan. He hadn't heard that name in 15 years, hadn't let himself think it. He crouched down so he was level with her. "Where'd you come from, Eliza?" 3 days north, maybe 4. I walked mostly at night." "Alone?" She nodded. John's eyes flicked to her feet again, the raw blisters along her heels, the cuts across her toes. 4 days. Alone. Through open country where coyotes and worse things roamed. "You hungry?" "Yes, sir." He stood, stepping aside. "Come in." She moved past him like a shadow, her eyes sweeping the room, taking in the rifle above the mantel, the table with 2 chairs, the cold fireplace. She didn't sit, just stood there, clutching the edge of her dress. John set the boot on the table and poured her a cup of water. She drank it in 3 long gulps, then set the cup down carefully, like it might break. He pulled the letter from the boot and unfolded it. The paper was thin, creased 100 times. The handwriting was rough, slanted, written in haste. "John, if you're reading this, I'm dead. I don't have time to explain everything, but I need you to know this girl is mine. Her name is Eliza. She's 8 years old. Her mother died 2 winters ago, and I've been raising her alone. I got mixed up with men I shouldn't have. Men who don't forgive debts. They're coming for me, and when they do, they'll come for her too. I can't let that happen. You owe me nothing, I know that, but I'm asking anyway. Keep her safe, please. Thomas Brennan." John read it twice, then a 3rd time. His hands were shaking. Thomas Brennan. The name brought back things he'd buried deep long nights in a cavalry tent. The smell of gunpowder and blood, the sound of a man screaming in the dark. Thomas had been a scout, a good one. They'd ridden together during the war, back when survival meant trusting the man next to you with your life. And John had failed him. It was a night ambush, outside a settlement they were supposed to protect. Thomas had taken a bullet meant for John, shattered his leg, left him bleeding in the dirt. By the time the smoke cleared, Thomas was gone, discharged, sent home with a limp and nothing else. John had never gone after him, never wrote, never tried to make it right. And now this. He folded the letter slowly and looked at Eliza. She was watching him with those 2 old eyes, waiting. "Your papa," John said carefully. "He didn't come back." She shook her head. "They came at night. He told me to hide in the root cellar. I heard shouting, gunshots. Then it got quiet." Her voice cracked again. "I waited till morning. When I came out, the house was burned. Papa's horse was gone. I found his boot near the creek." "Just the boot?" "Yes, sir." John's jaw clenched. He turned toward the window, staring out at the empty land. The weight of the letter pressed against his chest like a stone. "You got anyone else?" he asked. "Family? Kin?" "No, sir, just Papa." He closed his eyes, breathed slow. When he turned back, Eliza was still standing there, small and silent, like she was afraid to take up space. "You'll stay here," John said. "Long as you need." Her shoulders sagged, just a little. Relief, maybe, or exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. John nodded. He didn't know what else to say. Didn't know what he'd just agreed to, but the letter was still in his hand, and the girl was still standing in his house. And somewhere out there, men were looking for her. He picked up the boot again, turning it over in his hands. The sole was split, the leather cracked. Inside, faint stains. Blood, maybe, or mud. "You know who these men are?" he asked. "The ones your papa owed?" Eliza hesitated. "I heard names. Pike. Somebody called him Pike." John's blood went cold. Silas Pike. If that name was true, this wasn't just debt. It was a death sentence. He set the boot down carefully, like it might explode. His hands were steady now, but his mind was racing. "You did good, Eliza," he said quietly. "Your papa would be proud." She didn't answer, just looked at him with those eyes that had already seen too much. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. In the distance, a crow called out, sharp and low. John Calloway stood in his kitchen, holding a dead man's boot and a little girl's future, and for the first time in 15 years, he felt the weight of an old debt come due. John set Eliza up in the back room, the one he'd used for storage, filled with old saddles and crates of supplies. He cleared a space, laid down a blanket, and brought her a pillow that smelled like dust and leather. She sat on the edge of the makeshift bed, hands folded in her lap, watching him work. "You'll be safe here," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. "Yes, sir." He paused at the doorway. "You don't have to call me sir. John's fine." She nodded but didn't say anything. He left her there and walked back to the kitchen. The letter was still on the table, next to the boot. He sat down heavily, poured himself another cup of coffee, and read the letter again. "You owe me nothing." That line burned, because it wasn't true. John owed Thomas Brennan everything. A life, a second chance. 15 years of silence he'd never earned, and now Thomas was dead, and his daughter was sleeping in John's back room, and somewhere out in the territory, Silas Pike was still breathing. John had heard stories about Pike, everyone had. He ran a crew of enforcers, collecting debts for the mining companies and railroad bosses. He didn't just take money, he took land, livestock, lives. If you crossed him, you disappeared. If you owed him, he made sure everyone knew what happened when you didn't pay. John rubbed his face. He needed to think, needed a plan. But first, he needed to know if anyone had followed the girl. The next morning, John rode into town. Cedar Flats wasn't much a general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and strangers stood out like blood on snow. He tied his horse outside the store and stepped inside. The owner, a man named Wendell, looked up from behind the counter. "Calloway," Wendell said, nodding. "Don't see you in town much." "Need supplies," John said. "Flour, beans, coffee, and some cloth if you got it." Wendell raised an eyebrow. "Cloth? For a dress? You taken up sewing?" John didn't smile. "Just the cloth, Wendell." Wendell shrugged and started gathering the items. As he worked, he glanced at John. "You hear about the Brennan place?" John's hand stilled on the counter. "What about it?" "Burned to the ground. 3-4 nights ago. Some folks say it was an accident. Others say it wasn't." "Anyone hurt?" Wendell shook his head. "Don't know. Brennan lived out there alone, far as anyone could tell. Nobody's seen him since." John kept his face neutral. "That's so." "Yeah." Wendell leaned in, lowering his voice. "Word is, he owed money to some bad people, the kind you don't cross." "Pike?" Wendell's eyes widened slightly. "You know him?" "Know of him." Wendell straightened, suddenly nervous. "Look, Calloway, if you're smart, you'll stay clear of that. Pike's been through here twice in the last month, him and his men. They're looking for something or someone. I don't know what, but I know better than to ask." John nodded slowly. "Appreciate the warning." He paid for the supplies, loaded them onto his horse, and rode out of town without another word. Back at the ranch, Eliza was sitting on the porch steps, her knees drawn up to her chest. She looked up when she heard the horse. "You left," she said. "Just to town. Had to get some things." He unloaded the supplies and brought them inside. Eliza followed him, quiet as a ghost. "Here," he said, handing her the cloth. "For a new dress. This one's about done." She took it carefully, running her fingers over the fabric. "Thank you." He watched her for a moment, then sat down at the table. "Eliza, I need to ask you something." She looked at him, waiting. "These men who came for your Papa Pike and his crew, did they see you?" She shook her head. I don't think so. I stayed in the cellar like Papa said. I didn't come out till they were gone. You sure? Yes. Sir, I mean, yes. John exhaled slowly. That was something, at least. If they didn't know about her, she might still be safe. Might. One more thing, he said. Your papa ever tell you why he owed Pike money? Eliza hesitated. He said he borrowed it to pay for Mama's medicine, but it wasn't enough. She died anyway. And then Pike wanted more than Papa borrowed. Said there was interest. Said Papa signed papers. John's jaw tightened. That was how Pike worked. Loan you money when you were desperate, then bleed you dry. Did your papa have anything else? Land? Deeds? Anything Pike might want? Eliza shook her head. Just the house, and it's gone now. John leaned back in his chair, thinking. If Pike burned the house, he was making a statement. But if he was still looking, it meant he hadn't found what he wanted, which meant he'd keep looking, and eventually he'd hear about a girl who'd walked 4 days to Cedar Flats. John stood abruptly. Pack what you need. We're leaving. Eliza's eyes went wide. Leaving? Where? North. There's a settlement near the canyon, smaller than Cedar Flats, harder to find. We'll stay there till this blows over. What about the ranch? Ranch'll keep. She stood slowly, clutching the cloth. Are they coming here? John looked at her, this small, fragile thing who'd already lost everything. Not if I can help it, he said. But even as he said it, he heard the sound. Hoofbeats. Faint, but growing louder. John moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside. 3 riders, coming up the road. Dust rising behind them. He recognized the man in front. Silas Pike. John's blood turned to ice. Eliza, he said quietly. Go to the back room. Get under the bed. Don't come out till I tell you. But now, she ran. John grabbed his rifle from above the mantel, checked the chamber, and moved to the door. The riders stopped in the yard. Pike dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face like carved stone. His eyes were dark, cold, calculating. John Calloway, Pike called out. Been a while. John stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. Pike. Heard you might have something that belongs to me. Don't know what you're talking about. Pike smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. See, I think you do. Pike stood in the yard like a monument to violence, still, patient, and utterly certain. The 2 men flanking him stayed mounted, hands resting near their sidearms. They didn't speak, didn't need to. John kept the rifle low but ready. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. You rode a long way for nothing, John said. Pike tilted his head slightly, studying him. Funny thing, I was out at the Brennan place a few nights ago, looking for a man who owed me. Found the house, found the barn. Didn't find the man. That's a shame. It is, Pike agreed. But you know what I did find? Tracks, small ones, leading east. He paused, letting the words settle. Toward here. John didn't move, didn't blink. Pike took a step closer. Now, I'm a reasonable man, Calloway. I don't like making messes, so I'm going to ask you once, nice and polite. Is there a little girl in that house? No. Pike smiled again. You sure about that? I'm sure. One of the riders shifted in his saddle. Pike held up a hand, stopping him. See, here's the problem, Pike said. Thomas Brennan signed a contract. He borrowed money, and when he couldn't pay, he put up collateral. His land, his house, and his family. John's stomach twisted. His family? That's right. Everything he had, everything he was. And that includes his daughter. The words hung in the air like smoke. John's grip tightened on the rifle. That's not a contract. That's slavery. Pike shrugged. Call it what you want. Law sees it different, he signed. Witnesses and everything. That girl belongs to me now, same as the house did. The house burned. Accidents happen. John's jaw clenched. She's not here. Pike studied him for a long moment, then turned to one of his men. Charlie, go check the house. The rider dismounted and started toward the porch. John raised the rifle. That's far enough. Charlie stopped. Pike's smile faded. Now, Calloway, Pike said slowly, you don't want to do this. I'm not letting you in my house. That's not your call. It is when you're standing in my yard. Pike's eyes narrowed. You know who I am. You know what I do. And you're still going to stand there and lie to me? I'm not lying. There's no girl here. Then you won't mind if we look. I do mind. Pike took another step forward. You're making a mistake. Maybe. You're one man. Calloway. I got a dozen more back in town. You think you can hold me off? Don't know, but I'm willing to find out. For a moment, nobody moved. The wind picked up, rattling the loose boards on the porch. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow passing across the yard. Then Pike laughed. It was a low, bitter sound. You got guts, I'll give you that. But guts don't stop bullets. He turned toward his horse, then paused. I'll be back, Calloway, and next time, I won't ask. Nice. He mounted up, and the three riders turned and rode out, slow and deliberate, like they had all the time in the world. John didn't lower the rifle until they were out of sight. Inside, Eliza crawled out from under the bed. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. Are they gone? She whispered. John set the rifle down and nodded. For now. What did he mean? About Papa signing a contract? John hesitated. He didn't want to tell her, didn't want to put that weight on her, but she deserved the truth. Your papa borrowed money from Pike, John said carefully, and when he couldn't pay it back, Pike made him sign something, a contract that said if he didn't pay, Pike could take everything. Including me. John's throat tightened. Yeah. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. But that's not fair. No, it's not. What are we gonna do? John knelt down in front of her. We're gonna fight it. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. Where? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring trouble. This isn't your fault. It feels like it is. John put a hand on her shoulder. Listen to me. Your papa asked me to keep you safe, and that's what I'm gonna do, no matter what. She nodded, sniffling. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Yes. Good. That night, John didn't sleep. He sat at the table, the letter in front of him, thinking. Pike would be back, that much was certain. And next time, he'd bring more men. Maybe the law too, if he'd greased the right palms. John couldn't fight that, not alone. But maybe he didn't have to. He thought about the war, about the men he'd served with. Some were dead, some had scattered to the wind, but a few were still around, still close enough to call on if the need was great. And this need was great. He pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. 3 letters, 3 names, men he trusted, men who owed him or who he'd owed. If he could get them here, maybe they'd have a chance. If not, he didn't finish the thought. The next morning, he rode into town again, this time to the telegraph office. He sent the letters, paying extra to make sure they went out fast. Then he stopped by the church. Reverend Keller was sweeping the steps when John walked up. Calloway, Keller said, surprised. Didn't expect to see you here. Need a favor? Keller set the broom down. What kind of favor? The kind you don't ask questions about. Keller frowned. That sounds like trouble. It is. Keller studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Come inside. They sat in the empty church, light filtering through the stained glass windows. John told him everything, the girl, the letter, Pike, the contract. When he finished, Keller was silent. That's a heavy burden, Keller said finally. I know. And you're sure about this? About standing against Pike? I'm sure. Keller nodded slowly. Then I'll help, however I can. I need you to keep an eye on her. If something happens to me, if Pike comes and I'm not there, I need you to get her out. Take her north. There's a mission near the canyon. They'll take her in. You think it'll come to that? I hope not, but I need to be ready. Keller stood and placed a hand on John's shoulder. You're a good man, Calloway. Better than you think. John didn't answer. He just nodded and left. As he rode back to the ranch, he saw them riders on the ridge, watching. 3 of them, Pike's men. They didn't move, just watched. John kept riding, but he knew the clock was ticking. The days that followed were quiet, but the quiet was a lie. John worked the ranch like always, mending fences, tending the horses, checking the water line, but his rifle was never far. He kept Eliza close, teaching her how to stay low, how to move quiet, how to recognize the sound of hoofbeats from a distance. She learned fast. Too fast. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the sky red, John found her sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the horizon. He sat down beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. You miss him, John said finally. Eliza nodded. Every day. Tell me about him. She looked at him, surprised. What do you want to know? Anything. What was he like? Eliza was quiet for a moment, thinking. He was kind. He didn't talk much, But when he did, it mattered. He used to sing sometimes. Old songs. Mama used to sing them too before she got sick. What kind of songs? Sad ones, mostly. About leaving home. About missing people. She paused. He'd sing them when he thought I was asleep, but I'd listen. John's chest tightened. He'd known Thomas during the war, but that was a different man, younger, harder, shaped by survival. He tried to picture Thomas as a father, singing to a little girl in the dark. It was hard. "He talked about you once," Eliza said quietly. John looked at her. "He did?" "Yeah. He said you saved his life." John shook his head. "It was the other way around. That's not what he said. He told me you carried him 3 miles after he got shot. Said you wouldn't leave him, even when the others did." John's throat went dry. He remembered that night the weight of Thomas on his shoulders, the blood soaking through both their shirts, the sound of gunfire behind them. He'd carried Thomas because leaving him wasn't an option. But afterward, when Thomas was sent home, John had let him go, let him disappear, let the guilt bury itself under years of silence. "I should have done more," John said. "You're doing it now." He looked at her, this small girl with her father's eyes. "He trusted you," Eliza said. "That's why he told me to find you." John nodded slowly. "I won't let him down." "I know." That night, John cooked supper beans and cornbread, simple but warm. They ate together at the table, and for the first time since Eliza had arrived, the house didn't feel so empty. After supper, John brought out a deck of cards. "You know how to play?" he asked. Eliza shook her head. "I'll teach you." They played for an hour, nothing serious, just simple games to pass the time. Eliza laughed when she won, a bright, clear sound that made John realize how little laughter had been in this house for years. When it got late, he sent her to bed. But as she stood to leave, she paused. "John." "Yeah? Do you think Papa's in heaven?" John was quiet for a long moment. He wasn't a religious man, didn't have easy answers for questions like that. "I think," he said carefully, "that if there's a place for good men, your Papa's there." She nodded, satisfied. "Good night." "Good night, Eliza." She disappeared into the back room, and John sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from him. The next morning, a rider came. John was outside chopping wood when he saw the dust. He set the axe down, wiped his hands, and waited. The rider was alone, an older man, lean and weathered, with a grey beard and sharp eyes. He dismounted slowly, moving like someone who'd spent too many years in the saddle. "Calloway," the man said. John's eyes narrowed. "McCabe. Been a long time." It had. Daniel McCabe was a scout during the war, same as Thomas. They'd ridden together more than once. John hadn't seen him in over a decade. "Got your letter," McCabe said. "Came as fast as I could." John exhaled slowly, relief mixed with something heavier. "You didn't have to come." "Yeah, I did." McCabe glanced toward the house. "This about Brennan?" "Yeah." "Heard he was dead." "He is." McCabe nodded slowly. "And the girl?" "Inside. Pike know about her." "He knows." McCabe whistled low. "That's bad." "I know." McCabe tied his horse and followed John into the house. Eliza was at the table, sewing the cloth John had bought her into a dress. She looked up when they entered. "Eliza," John said, "this is Daniel McCabe. He's an old friend." McCabe tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Eliza nodded shyly. "Hello." McCabe looked at John. "She's Brennan's?" "She is." McCabe studied her for a moment, then turned back to John. "You know Pike's not going to let this go." "I know." "And you're still going to fight him?" "I am." McCabe grinned, a slow, tired grin. "Then I guess I'm fighting too." Over the next 2 days, 2 more men arrived. The first was Samuel Cross, a sharpshooter who'd saved John's life at least twice during the war. He was quiet, methodical, and deadly with a rifle. The second was Henry Briggs, a brawler with fists like hammers and a laugh that could shake a building. He'd served with Thomas and John both, and when he heard what happened, he didn't hesitate. The 4 of them sat around the table that night, mapping out the land, talking strategy. "Pike's got numbers," McCabe said. "But numbers don't mean much if we pick the right ground." "There's a pass north of here," John said. "Narrow. Easy to defend." "Think he'll come through there?" Cross asked. "If he's smart, he won't. But Pike's not used to people saying no. He'll come head-on." Briggs cracked his knuckles. "Good. I like head-on." McCabe glanced at Eliza, who was sitting by the fire, pretending not to listen. "What about her?" "Keller's got a place ready," John said. If it goes bad, he'll get her out. And if it goes good—" John didn't answer. McCabe leaned back. "You really think we can win this?" John looked at him. "I think we have to try." McCabe nodded. "Then we try." That night, after the others had gone to sleep, John found Eliza on the porch again. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Too much noise in my head." He sat down beside her. "I know the feeling." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the wind. "John," Eliza said quietly. "Yeah? Thank you. For everything." He didn't know what to say, so he just put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, small and warm and alive. And for a moment, the weight of everything, Thomas, Pike, the war, the years of silence, lifted just enough to breathe. They came at dawn. John was already awake when he heard the hoofbeats steady, rhythmic, growing louder. He moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside. 12 riders, maybe more. Pike was in the lead, flanked by his men, all armed. "They're here," John called out. McCabe, Cross, and Briggs were up in seconds, grabbing rifles and moving to positions. John had already planned it out. McCabe on the roof, Cross at the window, Briggs by the door. John would meet them outside. "Eliza," John said, turning to her, "you remember what I told you?" She nodded, her face pale. "Hide in the cellar. Don't come out. That's right. And if something happens, if you hear gunshots and then nothing, you run. Straight to Reverend Keller. You understand?" "Yes. Good girl." He squeezed her shoulder, then watched her disappear down the cellar stairs. When he turned back, the others were ready. "Let's end this," John said. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand. The riders had stopped in the yard, forming a loose semicircle. Pike dismounted slowly, his face unreadable. "Calloway," Pike said. "Last chance. Give me the girl. And we all walk away. She's not yours to take. I've got a legal contract that says otherwise. That contract's worth less than the paper it's written on." Pike's jaw tightened. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Good." Pike gestured to his men. "Tear the place apart. Find her." The riders started forward. John raised his rifle. "Stop." They did. But only because they saw McCabe on the roof, Cross at the window, and Briggs stepping out from the side of the house, all armed. Pike's eyes narrowed. "You brought friends." "I did." "Won't matter. You're still outnumbered." "Maybe. But you'll lose men. Maybe all of them. Maybe you." John's voice was steady, cold. "Is one little girl worth that?" Pike stared at him. For a long moment, the world held its breath. Then Pike smiled. "You know what? You're right. She's not worth it." He turned to his men. "Mount up. We're leaving." But as he started to turn, his hand dropped to his sidearm. John saw it. So did McCabe. The shot rang out, echoing across the valley. Pike's hand froze. His gun clattered to the ground. He looked down at his side, where blood was already spreading across his shirt. McCabe's rifle was still smoking. Pike staggered, then dropped to one knee. His men raised their weapons, but Cross and Briggs had them covered. "Don't," John said, his rifle aimed at the nearest rider. "It's over." For a moment, no one moved. Then one of Pike's men, the one called Charlie, slowly lowered his gun. "This ain't worth dying for," he said. He turned his horse and rode off. One by one, the others followed. Pike was left alone, kneeling in the dirt, clutching his side. He looked up at John, his face twisted in pain and fury. "You think this changes anything?" Pike spat. "The contract's still real. Someone else will come." John walked down the steps, standing over him. "Then I'll be waiting." He reached down, pulled the contract from Pike's coat, and held it up. Then he tore it in half. "Contract's void," John said. "Girl's free." Pike's eyes burned, but he said nothing. He just staggered to his feet, climbed onto his horse, and rode off, leaving a trail of blood in the dust. When the dust settled, John went back inside. The others were standing in the main room, breathing hard, rifles still in hand. "That it?" Briggs asked. "That's it," John said. McCabe climbed down from the roof, shaking his head. "Hell of a thing." John nodded. Then he opened the cellar door. "Eliza, it's over." She came up slowly, eyes wide. "Is he gone?" "He's gone." She ran to him, and he caught her, holding her tight. The next few days passed quietly. McCabe, Cross, and Briggs stayed long enough to make sure no one else came. When it was clear Pike wouldn't be back, they said their goodbyes. "You need us again, you know where to find us," McCabe said. I do, John replied. Thank you. McCabe tipped his hat and rode off, the others following. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from a lawyer in the territorial capital, confirming that Silas Pike had withdrawn all claims on the Brennan estate. The contract was officially annulled. Eliza was free, truly free. John read the letter to her, and when he finished, she cried not out of sadness, but relief. It's really over, she asked. It's really over. That spring, John started teaching Eliza how to ride. She was nervous at first, gripping the reins too tight, but she learned fast. By summer, she was racing him across the open fields. Her laughter carried on the wind. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Eliza looked at him. John? Yeah. Do you think Papa can see us? Wherever he is? John thought about it. Yeah, I think he can. Do you think he's proud? John looked at her, this girl who'd walked 4 days through the wilderness, who'd survived loss and fear and danger, and who was still smiling. I know he is, John said. She smiled and leaned against him. Good. Years later, when Eliza was grown and had a family of her own, she'd return to the ranch. She'd sit on that same porch, watching her own children play in the yard, and she'd remember. She'd remember her father's voice, singing in the dark. She'd remember the letter in the boot, and the man who'd read it and dropped to his knees. She'd remember John Calloway, the man who'd stood between her and the wolves, who'd kept his promise, who'd become the father she'd needed when hers was gone. And she'd whisper a quiet thank you to the wind, knowing somehow, somewhere, both men heard her. The ranch still stood, the land still stretched wide and free, and the legacy of a promise kept lived on.